Number 10. Symbiote Spider-Man. Obviously we have to start off this list with a classic. Introduced in 1989's What If Volume 2 Number 4, we're given a glimpse into the life of Earth 1089's Peter Parker after his suit bonded with the Venom symbiote. In this reality, the symbiote couldn't be removed from Peter Parker even though the Fantastic Four and other heroes tried using a combination of magic and science. It ended up taking over Peter's mind and body, feeding off his adrenaline, causing him to age at a very rapid rate. Once his body couldn't sustain the symbiote any longer, it used him to possess superheroes like Hulk and even caused the death of a few others. Free from the symbiote's control, it's then revealed that Peter Parker has now aged to 85 with not a whole lot of time left. He was later found dead by Mr. Fantastic, surrounded by research on how to kill the symbiote that he was once bonded to. Although it was out of his control, Symbiote Spider-Man was considered even worse than Venom, one of the most sadistic villains in the Marvel Universe, and unfortunately he never really got that redemption. Number 9. Peter Parker, Earth 9591. Now we're all familiar with the origin story of Peter Parker, spider bite leads to powers, leads to the birth of the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man, but have you ever wondered what it would look like if things took a bit of a different turn after that spider bite? Well, wonder no longer, because in 1995's Ruin Number 2, we're actually introduced to a different Peter Parker who isn't so lucky. After being bitten by the radioactive spider, Peter develops a total of 0 powers and is instead infected with a mutant virus that ultimately leads to his death. This Earth never gets the chance to meet the hero Spider-Man, and instead they're given a rash and scar-covered Peter Parker who was forced to live the remainder of his life in quarantine so he wouldn't infect anyone else. I always wondered what would happen realistically after that spider bite, but man, I really didn't think it would be that dark. Number 10. Spider-Man, Earth 10011. Starting off with a pretty dark one hailing from the Cancerverse. Now, what is the Cancerverse, you ask? Well, on Earth 10011, life finally defeated death, and for some reason, with such a surplus of life being fueled by the many angled ones, this caused every living thing on Earth to be corrupted and basically turned into living corpses that will do their bidding. Now, it's a really interesting story, so check it out for yourself in 2010's Realm of Kings number 1, but anyways, let's get back to the Spider-Man. She is one of the grotesque creatures we see go head to head with the Cosmic Avengers when they attack Sanctuary 2. Now, we don't get to know her for very long since she is beaten to death by Ronan the Accuser shortly after her introduction, but from what we can see, I can understand why you wouldn't want her around for too long. Possessing all of the proportionate powers of a spider, such as enhanced strength, speed, stamina, and reflexes, this Spider-Man also possesses spider-like fangs, arms, and a lower half, which they bring to the table, basically making them the spider equivalent of a centaur. So yeah, I really wouldn't want that charging at me at full speed. Check her out for yourself in her first and last appearance in 2010's Thanos Imperative number 4. Number 9. Webman. Now, another one-off Spidey variant with not the most clever name in my opinion, but hey, who am I to judge? Webman is basically Spider-Man's evil mirror twin, introduced to us when Spider-Man entered a room through a window and started looking at his reflection in a mirror. Now, what he didn't realize is that it was actually a one-way mirror, and on the other side was Dr. Doom, who jumped at the chance to use his twin machine to create a copy of Spider-Man. With all the powers of our friendly neighborhood hero, you would assume that this evil clone would be a formidable foe. However, he was created with the opposite traits of Peter, meaning he was actually quite stupid, and was not able to complete the task given to him by Dr. Doom. Realizing this, Doom attempts to create another clone of Peter, but his twin machine is destroyed before he could complete the task, and this led to his arrest. Now, it's actually unknown where Webman ended up. He could actually still be out there somewhere, probably trying to find his way out of a wet paper bag or something, I don't know. Either way, why not check out Webman for yourself in his first and supposedly last appearance in 1977's Spidey Super Stories number 25. Number 8. Blood Spider. Alongside Joe Emberlin, aka Jagged Bow, and Timothy Carlskin, aka Death Shield, Michael Bingham was taken under Taskmaster's wing and trained to mimic Spider-Man in order to one day kill him. Although Michael possesses somewhat primitive tech compared to Peter, such as his web shooters that are attached to a backpack-like fluid holder, he is still not someone you want to mess with. Since he was handpicked by the Taskmaster to be Spider-Man's match, he was trained in the fighting style of Spider-Man, and it can be assumed that his powers were a close match to those of Spider-Man himself before he was even picked. Now, not a whole lot is known about how he obtained his powers, but Blood Spider has demonstrated superhuman reflexes and strength in many fights over the years. He's able to smash his fist into a wall without flinching, dodge bullets, and he has the ability to cling to walls like our wise-cracking webhead, but it's not known if that is through artificial or natural means. Created by Jerry Bingham and also named after him, take a look at his character for yourself, starting with his first appearance in 1992's Amazing Spider-Man number 367.
Number 10. Ultimate Clone Saga. This version of the Clone Saga didn't just have a good and evil clone of Peter Parker, but instead had a whole slew of clones to choose from. This time around, the people responsible for creating these Peter Parker clones were Otto Octavius and Dr. Connors, who were both working with the FBI and CIA. It also involves a version of Jessica Drew that instead is a female clone of Peter, but who still had all of his memories. Weird. The CIA planned to manipulate her mind and wipe Peter's memories from it, but before they got a chance to follow through with their plan, Jessica freed the other clones and they all escaped. You can find this story in the Ultimate Spider-Man series. Number 9, Web of Death. I'm sorry, but you know my love of the 90s, so sometimes we gotta go there. This 4-part story arc takes place between 2 comic serials, The Amazing Spider-Man and Spectacular Spider-Man. While it is part of the Clone Saga, which has led, I'm sure, many to dismiss Web of Death, and many of the consequences of the story were later undone, I do think it's something worth reading. Especially if you're a Doc Ock fan, because it has lots of good moments between him and Peter, who at the time is dying from a virus given to him by Vulture. And we also get to see the brutal death of Otto at the hands of the frightening, messed up Peter Parker clone, Kane, with his luscious hair. This is also the story arc where MJ got pregnant and her and Peter are gonna have a baby. There's also a part of the story where you think that Peter actually kicked the bucket and died. Needless to say, if you want some intrigue and murder and you can deal with 90s comics and you love them maybe like I do, this one is for you. So, you're welcome. Or, sorry.
Number 8, Ghost Spider. Now, this is one of my favorite costumes in the Spider-Man PS4 game, so you know I had to add it to the list. On Earth 11,638, Peter's Uncle Ben wasn't ever murdered and actually helped him hone his skills as the Amazing Spider. Despite this, he doesn't always use his abilities and intellect for good, and thanks to the resources from his lab, Parker Technologies, the Amazing Spider found a way to bring over other Spider-Men from different universes and absorb their powers. After bringing Earth 616 Peter Parker into his universe, the Spider is convinced by him that what he's been doing isn't heroic at all. Then, when Ben is about to absorb Earth 616 Peter's powers, we see the Spider stand in the way and instead had his powers absorbed, putting his body into a comatose state and trapping his spirit in hell. Following the Sorcerer Supreme's fight with the Infernal Hulk, we see Peter given a second chance at life after he was infused with the spirits and powers of the repentant damned. Now possessing powers similar to Ghost Rider along with his Spidey powers, he awakes from his coma as the Ghost Spider and uses his second chance to correct some of the mistakes he's made already. Check him out in his first appearance in 2011's Amazing Spider-Man Annual number 38. Number 7, Superior Spider-Man. Following an insane life that deserves a read if you're not familiar with it already, Otto Octavius transplanted his mind into the body of Peter Parker, leaving Peter in his body. Still retaining Peter's memories, he was able to trick all of Peter's loved ones into thinking nothing was wrong. Otto believed that he could be a better Spider-Man and, following the death of Peter Parker, took up the role as the Superior Spider-Man, upgrading the spider suit to better fit his needs. Many battles ensued, and then it's revealed along the way that Peter's consciousness still lived on inside his body, and after the Goblin King kidnapped Anna Maria, Otto's love interest while in Peter's body, Otto begins to hesitate to save others as he has a chance to save her and doubts he can save everyone without having time to plan. Peter's consciousness pushes him to save the child who is also in danger at the same time, and Otto realizes that Peter is more deserving of the role of Spider-Man and completely erases his consciousness so that Peter can take control of his body once more and save everyone. He sacrificed himself for the girl he loved and the man he hated for the greater good, and that just goes to show you that even if you start off as a villain, you can change and become a hero. Now, there's a lot more to the story that I had to gloss over or skip, so I highly recommend you check out the story for yourself, starting with The Amazing Spider-Man number 697. Number 7, Scarlet Spider. The Jackal's first attempt at cloning Peter Parker, Kane Parker was initially thought to be a success, but later degenerated and became mentally unstable. Discarded by the Jackal but allowed to live, Kane left and soon realized that his degeneration had actually amplified his powers and made him stronger than Peter. Able to lift up to approximately 60 tons, Kane also outclasses Peter with his super speed, stamina, and Mark of Kane, which is an ability he has that allows him to severely burn someone through skin-to-skin contact. Kane's major introduction into the Spidey world was during the Clone Saga, where he was tricked into believing the real Peter Parker was actually the clone, and he was determined to eliminate Ben Reilly, the actual clone, so his quote-unquote clone could live the life he wasn't able to have thanks to the degeneration of his body and mind. Now that's all I'm going to say about the storyline because he does have to do some pretty twisted things, and I genuinely think you guys should all read it for yourselves. Since then, Kane has toned down his evil intentions and has used his powers for good, going as far as dying during the fight with Deimos as a member of the Spider Army, but that didn't last for too long because he does eventually come back to life. Now, Now, obviously, there is so much more I could talk about when it comes to this character. He is such a great one, and there are so many layers to him. It was so difficult to condense it all down. So, if you want to know more, let me know in the comments below, and maybe we'll dedicate an entire video to Kane Parker. But for now, though, check him out in his first appearance in 1994's Web of Spider-Man number 119. Number 6, Spider-Carnage. Just so you all know, I'm going to be talking about the Spider-Carnage that we see in 1998's Spider-Verse arc in the Spider-Man animated series. Ben Reilly, also known as Scarlet Spider, but not to be confused with Kane Parker, was a successfully cloned Spider-Man created by Miles Warren. Hating that there was a double of him out there, Ben bonded with the Carnage symbiote, creating the terrifying and powerful creature known as Spider-Carnage. With all the powers and abilities of both Spider-Man and Carnage, Ben devastated New York and intended to wipe out pretty much all of reality, but thankfully he was somewhat stopped by the Spider-Man of different realities. Traveling to another dimension to try and unfold his plan there, he gains the support of that world's Kingpin, but is eventually attacked by one of the various Spider-Men once again. Our friendly Spidey realizes somehow that Ben is not truly evil, he's just confused and hurt since both his Aunt May and Uncle Ben are gone. So he enlists the help of Earth's 31,198's Uncle Ben, who is able to appeal to the Peter within and calm down the beast. This unfortunately was not enough to unbind him from the symbiote though, and Ben Reilly decided to jump into an unbalanced portal, ultimately vaporizing both him and the symbiote. Now, even though this is an older storyline from the show, I highly recommend you check it out for yourself because it still holds up, trust me. So check out Season 5, Episode 12 and 13 of Spider-Man the Animated Series. Number 5. Poison. Peter Parker from Earth 70,134 has a similar history to his 616 counterpart up until his second battle with Morlun. And now, hanging from a cocoon under the Brooklyn Bridge, he is offered the chance to be reborn by the other. However, he actually rejected the power by ripping off its head and killing it. This was a pretty bad idea because this left his metamorphosis / resurrection incomplete. Lucky for him though, the Venom symbiote sensed this somehow and left Mac Gargan to merge with Peter. Although he fought against the symbiote for months on end, Peter eventually succumbed to it and allowed it to destroy his psyche and completely take over. Believing that his new form was a gift that should be shared, he tried to have it bond with Mary Jane, who obviously refused, and soon after both Wolverine and Luke Cage attempted to take him down, but failed because Poison is way too strong. He literally has all the powers of Peter Parker and Venom. Skip ahead a little bit and we see him try to convince MJ once again to accept his quote-unquote gift, and she says no again for obvious reasons and somehow convinces him to leave. So even though Peter had completely lost himself to the symbiote, he still showed some self-restraint, making him not the worst dark alternate, I guess. Yet another one-off dark Spidey. Check out this Earth's Peter for yourself in 2007's What If Spider-Man the Other number 1. Number 4, Spiders Man. Yep, you heard me right. Spiders Man. Once a promising young student at Horizon University, Peter of Earth 11,580 gained his powers after he fell into a massive colony of genetically altered spiders. Assumed to be dead because it looked like the spiders completely devoured him, in reality the spiders had actually just absorbed his consciousness and started to act as a single hive mind, dubbing itself Spiders Man. The name kind of makes sense now, right? Yeah. This Peter played a decent role in the Spider-Geddon storyline, as both he and Spider-Norman are recruited into the Superior Spider Army and both decide to eventually leave the group. They end up being teleported to the Web of Life and Destiny, and while Spiders-Man is feasting on Carnes' corpse, Norman decides to destroy the web, but not before Spiders-Man sends a bunch of his spiders across the multiverse to spy on all the other Spideys out there. With powers similar to Carl King, aka the Thousand, this creepy crawly alternate Spider-Man is not one that I would want to go toe-to-toe with. Having first appeared in 2019 Spider-Geddon number 3, why not check him out for yourself and let me know what you think of him in the comments below. Number 3, we have Masked Marvel. In 2018's What If the Punisher number 1, we are given a glimpse of what it would be like if Peter Parker was Spider-Man, but also the Punisher. Peter of this Earth, or 71,928, has a pretty much identical origin story to his 616 counterpart, until he decided to kill the burglar that killed his Uncle Ben rather than leave his fate in the hands of the police. From that point on, he decided that as Spider-Man, he would do anything necessary when it came to fighting crime, even keeping the gun that killed his Uncle Ben on him at all times, as a reminder of what had been taken from him and what he had to do to keep everyone in his life safe. With all the same powers of our familiar 616 webhead, this Spidey fights crime under the name of the Masked Marvel. Although he tried to avoid using the gun at all costs, this Peter had no issue pulling it out and killing someone if it was for the greater good. An excellent example of this is when the Sinister Six kidnapped his Aunt May and Betty Brant, and he had no other choice but to engineer weapons specifically designed to take out each member of the Six. Now eventually Peter meets Gwen Stacy and falls in love, and she ends up getting kidnapped by the Green Goblin, which once again forces him to create a weapon specifically designed to kill the villain. After this though, he actually retires his suit, reveals his identity to Gwen, and they get married and live a very peaceful life together. Kind of a nice way to end, don't you think? Why not give his story a read for yourself and let me know what you think. Number 2, Brian Kornfield. Born and raised in New York City of Earth 616, Brian Kornfield was a huge Spider-Man fan and wanted nothing more than to get in contact with him. However, after his mother was mugged and killed, his motives changed and he wanted revenge on not only the killer, but Spider-Man for not saving her. After coming in contact with Dwarf, he was granted powers similar to Spider-Man and became Spider-X. What sets him apart from our regular old Spider-Man is that Brian is not very easy on the eyes, as he possesses 4 extra spider-like limbs coming out of his waist and upper back. And he also has razor-sharp fangs capable of tearing someone to shreds. After hunting down and killing his mother's killer, he began taking out as many criminals as possible because he truly believed he was created to bring justice to the world. Fast forward a little bit and we see Spider-X fighting his last battle against the mutant Paralyzer, who was trying to recreate Zax, and he ended up succeeding. In the fight against Zax, all the heroes present came together and defeated the giant electrical being, but the explosion actually killed both Paralyzer and Spider-X, and unfortunately, we haven't seen either of them again since. Check out Brian Kornfield for yourself in his first and last appearance as Spider-X in 1993's Midnight Suns Unlimited number 3. And number 1, ARACHKNIGHT. In the Warp World storyline that follows the life of Peter Parker, who lives in a pocket dimension where history was rewritten, we see Peter's Aunt May and Uncle Ben get murdered by the Goblin by Night on their way back from the American Museum of Natural History. Critically injured, Peter gets bitten by a mystical spider and is linked to the totem energy of ancient spiders, granting him his signature Spidey powers and saving his life. However, there was a drawback. This connection shattered his mind into 4 separate personalities, and although he fought against them for most of his early life, he eventually learned to listen to them and allow them to come through whenever they were needed. These personalities are known as the Arachnid, who is the dominant aspect of ARACHKNIGHT and is the most athletic persona, the Knight, who serves as Peter's aggressive side and is what keeps his crime-fighting side motivated, CEO Peter, who serves as the confident CEO of Parker Industries, and Science Peter, who is a working scientist with a strong passion for technology. Fighting crime as a member of the Defenders alongside Soldier Supreme, Iron Hammer, and Weapon Hex, ARACHKNIGHT is a true hero through and through despite going through a decent amount of hardships. Give this story a read for yourself and check out ARACHKNIGHT's first appearance in 2018's Infinity Wars number 3.
Number 8, KRAVEN'S Last Hunt. This scary Spider-Man story originally made us think that Spider-Man had finally been defeated and even killed. Kraven sets out to capture and kill Spider-Man, his ultimate prey, because Spidey always managed to get away. And surprisingly, Kraven succeeded and he made it all look pretty easy. Kraven buried Spider-Man and then took up the mantle himself, aiming to prove that he could do an even better job than his foe at defeating his own villains, because he figured Spider-Man had gotten away so many times, I really gotta do more to prove myself here. And to Kraven, defeating Spider-Man's foes proved that he was better. But when Spider-Man shockingly returned, spoiler alert, he was not dead, he was just knocked out for a few weeks, he revealed to Kraven his objective as Spider-Man was never to completely destroy his foes, but simply to prevent the crimes they sought to commit. Deciding that he had achieved everything he could while in his prime, and he'd proven himself pretty much, Kraven let Spider-Man go, and in the end he took his own life, resigned with his accomplishments. But don't worry, it's a comic book, so he comes back. Number 7, Dying Wish. In this story arc, starting in Amazing Spider-Man issue 698 and spanning 3 issues, Peter Parker does actually die. Sort of. This is the final chapter in an ongoing plot of Otto Octavius, wherein Otto aims to take over Peter's body as his was failing. He succeeds in swapping bodies with Peter and leaves Parker's consciousness to die inside his former body. Ugh. While Peter inside Otto's body is fighting to stay alive, in the end he does perish, but not before he can flood Otto's mind with memories of his life, inspiring Otto Octavius to flip sides and turn to a life of heroics, surprisingly. Even aiming, like Kraven in a way, to be better than Peter, taking up the mantle superior Spider-Man. Because obviously, you know, he's like, I'm gonna be superior to Peter Parker. Doesn't quite turn out that way, but that's okay. Number 6, Spider-Man Reign. So, you may be familiar with the Old Man Logan storyline, and have you ever wondered what this story would be like if it were about Spider-Man instead? Well, if you have, look no further, because this dark and depressing story is basically Old Man Parker, or Old Man Spider-Man. This version of Peter Parker is an old man full of regrets. Peter went on to own a flower shop, but was destroyed when MJ died of cancer as a result of being exposed to his radioactive bodily fluids. Basically driven insane by grief, he ends up returning to a life of fighting crime in his old age, when he's not busy clutching tombstones while crying and having very terrifying hallucinations. This story is also almost as violent as it is depressing, so if you're into that, you should check it out. Number 5, Go Down Swingin'. If you haven't heard about this story arc and you are a big fan of the Spider-Man comics and Peter Parker's villains, this one is going to be a must-read for you. This 4-part story arc takes place in the Amazing Spider-Man series starting in issue 797. Realizing that he is at his most powerful when he gives into his own inner demons, Norman Osborn plots to get his powers back, and part of this plot involves the Carnage symbiote. Yep, I think you know where we're going with this. Norman Osborn manages to succeed in this and merges with the symbiote to become Red Goblin. It takes tons of heroes from the Spider-Man world to band together and defeat him after he manages to convince Peter Parker to give up the Spider-Man mantle in exchange for not brutally killing Peter and his family. I mean, is that a fair deal? Instead, Parker is forced to fight against Red Goblin as himself in order to defeat this new version of the 2 merged psychotic foes. Probably one of the most horrifying foes we've yet to see. Also, it really messed up Norman Osborn doing this. Like, a lot. But I guess that was the goal. Number 4, Back in Black. This 5-part story arc takes place in Amazing Spider-Man starting in issue 539. Aunt May is rushed to critical care after being shot by an assassin while out with MJ and Peter. While her life hangs in the balance, Peter sets out to uncover evidence as to who was behind the attack. He discovers that Kingpin is to blame and pays a visit to Kingpin, who is in jail at the time, simply to kick the living out of him. The fight is brutal and violent. With Aunt May's fate uncertain, Peter tells Kingpin that he better hope that Aunt May survives, as his own life depends on it, promising that yeah, if Aunt May dies, he will return to finish Kingpin off and kill him. A pretty dark story for a hero who is generally known as having a no-kill policy. Number 3, Absolute Carnage. Absolute Carnage might not specifically center around Peter Parker's Spider-Man, but it is an event involving tons of characters from the Spider-Verse. In Absolute Carnage, Cletus Cassidy returns from the dead after merging with a new symbiote. The symbiote Carnage has seemingly perished as he attempted to save Cassidy when the two fell together from space back to Earth. Long story. However, remnants of the symbiote live on in Cassidy and are able to influence the new Grendel symbiote, basically turning it into sort of a new version of Carnage. With a new link to Null through the Grendel symbiote, Cassidy agrees to help free Null and sets out to collect the remnants of other symbiotes known as codexes, located in the spines of every person and super, dead or alive, who's ever bonded with the symbiote. So yeah, he's gotta go remove all their spines. Number 2, Shed. This 4-part story started in Spider-Man issue 630 and centers on Dr. Curt Connors. Though Spider-Man is also involved in this too, obviously. It is his series after all. Connors, after being reformed from his life as the Lizard, finds himself once again pulled to the dark side after the death of his wife Martha and the near loss of his son Billy, both to cancer. Billy, what a son name. Dr. Connors begins to lose control and once again finds himself becoming the Lizard and losing himself to animalistic instincts. The Lizard decides the best way to shake Connors' consciousness is by eating his son Billy. Spider-Man races across town to save Connors and stop him from this, but arrives too late. That's right, Doc Connors eats his own son, and as a result, he fully becomes Lizard. Not only is the story here brilliant, but there is some great use of color involved as well when it comes to the art. Lots of dramatic colors play with the use of light and dark, creating stark shadows, mixed with some brilliant pops of a blood red. Number 1, I Walked with a Spider. Sounds like I'm going to tell you about like a little children's tale. Once upon a time, there was a... Patton Parnell is actually one of the most terrifying alternate Spider-Man that I have yet to uncover. If you want something really gruesome, then this is a story for you. It only spans one issue of Edge of the Spider-Verse. You can find it in issue number 4. This issue was written by Clay McLeod Chapman with its disturbing and vivid artwork coming from Elia Bonetti. The story centers around Patton, who lives with his abusive Uncle Ted. He is bit by a radioactive spider and undergoes a slow, gruesome transformation into a spider-like monster that also comes with an uncontrollable urge to feed on living flesh. You know what they say, with great power comes great appetite.
Number 6, Doppelganger. The evil, pretty much mindless duplicate of Spider-Man from Earth 616, this version of Spider-Man was created by Magis during the Infinity War. Although he was killed during the Infinity War, this 6-armed Spidey clone was later revived by the Demogoblin, becoming its pet for a while. Doppelganger appears a few more times after the aftermath of the Infinity War, teaming up with Carnage, Shriek, Carrion, and the Demogoblin during the infamous Maximum Carnage killing spree, and then is later seen as part of the Spider Army to help defeat Morlun and the other Inheritors. Unfortunately for him, after many adventures, the Doppelganger was eventually captured and imprisoned in the rebuilt Ravencroft. Possessing many of the same powers as the original Spider-Man, what really sets Doppelganger apart is his raw strength. Being able to lift up to 25 tons as opposed to the normal 10 that most other Spider heroes can lift. Why not check him out for yourself in Infinity War number 1. Number 5. Pestilence. In 2005's Cable and Deadpool number 15, we see Deadpool dropped in Earth 5701 while on a search for Cable, where the supervillain Apocalypse has conquered New York and then changed 4 superheroes into his horsemen, one being the Spider-Man of this world. Alongside Famine, who's the Blob, Death, who is Archangel, and an alternate Cable known as War, they all serve under Apocalypse and aim to protect him at all costs. Now known as Pestilence, this 4-armed and 4-legged version of Spider-Man is not one you want to get close to, especially when you learn about his poisonous fangs and his hunger for human bones. Check him out for yourself and let me know what you think in the comments below. Number 4. The Other. In the 2005-2006 storyline of the same title, we see Spider-Man begin a transformation to his wild side. Peter began having these strange symptoms and dreams of Uncle Ben and spiders. Thinking he might be dying, Peter threw himself more and more into his crime fighting, especially against the scientific vampire known as Morlun, as Morlun wreaked havoc by beating Spider-Man so badly that he ended up in the hospital, and also by smacking Mary Jane around. Peter got to the point where he just couldn't take it anymore and reached his limits. In 2006 Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man number 3, we see Spider-Man pin Morlun down and kill him with a bite to the head. After what we all assume was Peter's death, we see Peter erupt from a cocoon with new powers and a newfound dedication to embracing his spider side that he refers to as the Other. Even though he embraced his dark side for a while, he does eventually come back to his senses and becomes the Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man once more. Number 3. Patton Parnell. Definitely one of the scariest looking Spider-Men, Patton Parnell has been described as a sociopathic version of Spider-Man who made the exact opposite decisions that Peter had. Growing up with an abusive uncle, Uncle Ted, Parnell was always a bit of a weird one, as he found joy in experimenting on animals and perversely spying on his next door neighbor Sarah Jane. Like other Spider-Men, Patton was bit by a spider, however, his body's reaction to it was a little bit different. Instead of turning into a superhero, he actually gained the ability to turn into a spider-like monster and started to seek revenge on those who had treated him poorly, starting with his uncle. He eventually leads Sarah Jane to his house and reveals his new form to her, and needless to say, she was terrified and not at all impressed. And then after a bite to the neck, the next morning we see hundreds of baby spiders coming out of Sarah Jane's neck. Thankfully, Parnell doesn't stick around for too long, as just after 3 days of having his power, he is drained of all his life force by Morlun. Check out this twisted story in 2014's Edge of Spider-Verse number 4. Number 2. The Spider. Showcased in the Exile series, we're introduced to one of the darkest Spider-Men to date. On Earth 15, Peter Parker was a sociopathic mass murderer who was sentenced to 67 consecutive life sentences and merged with the Carnage symbiote before being recruited by the Timebreakers into the Weapon X team. Using none of his powers for good, the Spider joined the other members of the team to try to conquer the Earth instead of actually helping them, finding nothing but joy in killing and torturing. It took a blast from Firestar to end his reign of terror alongside the other rebels. What makes this version of Spider-Man so terrifying is that he's one of the few Spideys who actually keeps the symbiote his entire career. With the symbiote's powers combined with Peter's evil rage, this puts the Spider at the same power level as Carnage at his strongest point, making him a truly frightening foe. Why not check him out for yourself in 2002's Exiles number 12 so you can see just how truly merciless this killer is. Number 1. Zombie Spider-Man. Now, not a whole lot is known about Earth 2149 Peter Parker's life before the zombie apocalypse, but it's presumed that it was similar to his 616 counterpart. On his search for the Necronomicon, the presumed source of the zombie infection, Peter ends up getting bit by Colonel America, who is a zombie at the time, and becomes infected. With his mind still relatively human, he hurries home to try and get his Aunt May and Mary Jane to safety. However, with the virus spreading quickly through his body, he winds up killing and eating them both. Alongside the other superpowered zombies, they ate almost all life on Earth until they ate Galactus, which granted them all the powers of the Power Cosmic, which they used to travel the universe, eating other worlds in their endless search for more food. After 40 years of eating worlds, they finally returned to Earth, still hungry to find Reed Richards' dimensional portal so they could finally continue their quest. However, Spidey noticed that his hunger was completely gone. Regaining his sense of justice, Spidey alongside some other good zombies found themselves locked in a battle with the other zombie heroes, trying their very hardest to convince them that their hunger was also gone and they could become heroes once again. Now, there is a whole lot more to the story of Spider-Man, and I could honestly talk about it for hours. This entire zombie universe is amazing. So if you're interested in hearing the rest of the Spidey's redemption story, why not let me know in the comments below and maybe we'll dedicate an entire video to it. If you want to read the story for yourself, why not check it out in Ultimate Fantastic Four number 22 and Marvel Zombies vs. Army of Darkness number 1.